Hey there. Thank you for watching this video here and picking it and choosing it. I hope you get a lot out of this today. This is the Mr. Heater, the portable buddy heater. And it is rated for indoor use, and it can be used outdoors as well, but this is a very unique propane heater that can be used for supplemental heat or emergency heat or just something that you can enjoy outside on the deck. Let me start out with a few safety things here. For this to be rated for indoor use, it must use the smaller type of propane tanks here. This is a 450 gram tank or a 1 pound refillable tank, or you can use a non-refillable tank in here for this to be legal. Code states that that's the only type of tank that you can bring into a house, National Fire Code, and you can only have 2 of those small containers in your home. If you notice out here, these other 2 types of propane tanks are outside. They're out there for a reason. I want to make sure everybody knows that. A larger propane tank is what you would have for a barbecue situation, and the smaller one is nice to take on a camping trip, which is it's a much lighter weight, and it's the equivalent of 4 of these smaller tanks. Over here, fire extinguisher, have that handy or nearby. The other thing that's off screen is a carbon monoxide detector. Now, while these heaters are probably 99.9% effective in converting propane into heat, water vapor, and carbon dioxide, there's always that chance of carbon monoxide, so take some extra precautions to be safe. The other thing is make sure that you open a door or window occasionally to replenish the oxygen that's used up by these heaters. I have a couple of other items here that are accessories. Some of them came with the heater. In this particular case, this heater was purchased from Costco, and it came with a high pressure hose and a fuel filter, and I'll explain that in a minute. The other additional items that I purchased were a refillable propane tank, a stove heater, a kit for refilling the refillable tank, and a regulated hose with a fitting that's a quick connect. So they all have different uses. Excuse me for a second. Anyways, this propane connector will connect to either one of those type of propane tanks and will supply high pressure propane to, hopefully you connect it to the fuel filter here, and then this fuel filter goes right in this area right here on a regulator that this tank is attached to right now. See how it moves up and down? That's the regulator. So the hose will attach there, or the fuel filter, then the hose. The reason for the filter is that when this propane hose is filled with high pressure propane, there are oils inside of the rubber and plasticizers that can leach out of the hose and make their way into the filter. And if you look at that, there's a little bit of shine to it. That's the incoming side of the filter. There's the output side. So this filter does trap those oils. I'm not sure if that oil was there when I purchased this or if it's something that came from the hose. I suspect that's like a little bit of silicone or something to just lubricate and allow for these edges to be supple, to keep that seal in there from cracking. Over here, same type of connection to the regulator in the heater, as you can see by the threads, but it's a quick connector. So imagine this is connected right here, and the rest of this is connected to a propane tank. What this does, this is a regulator right here. So the propane tank connects here and then goes to the regulator. So the rest of this line is low pressure. So I feel that that could be a little bit more safe because you have lower pressure going through here, and you have a quick connect system where you can come and go as you please. The nice thing about this is for this collar to pull down for the quick connect, you have to have this lever in the closed position. So there's very little chance that you're going to open and close this and have propane spray all over the place. When you close it, the collar no longer moves. So in this position where it's closed, it's really open to allow for propane to flow through. So we're closing the valve, we're opening the valve. So my use of the word close was really just that it's closed down on the collar, preventing it from moving. All right. Interesting thing here, and I wasn't sure if this would work out. This low pressure hose, one of the benefits of that is you don't need a filter. So that's one less thing that you have to worry about being available if you need to use this in an emergency and you're running the heater off of bulk propane. And having this regulated supply going into another regulator here of the same pressure, I was concerned that the heater would not be able to put out the right heat. And testing has proved that works just fine. So if you want to avoid this, you can always go with this regulated supply hose, and you'll have a much lower pressure in the hose, which if you ever have a crack in the hose, there's a lot less propane that will leak, and you have a quick connect here. The only thing I would say is make sure that this connection here is tight, just like that canister, and this connection here does not leak. So always check that. With this type of connector, there's less of a chance of leak. So you have a leak point outside and connected to that propane tank. And then the other place where it potentially could leak is on these threads, which is very similar to what you would have with this bottle. So both of these have their pluses and minuses. This is simple. You have to have a filter. The low pressure one has another connector, which I feel that's a potential leak point. But testing so far has been perfectly fine in my case here. And these things are rated for use, and they're supposed to be sealed. So they wouldn't be able to sell these without them sealing properly. Under no cases would these tanks be in the house, or I wouldn't even connect the hose from outside through that door to this propane heater indoors. I still would fill this tank and use it indoors only. This is the only time I would ever use this. So you see all this other gear. This is more for like camping situations or out on the deck or an extreme emergency where you've plumbed the hose through a wall properly. And I'm not going to get into that today. The other item here is this stove fan, which works off of the principle of thermoelectric generation. The lower portion of this metal gets hot, the top portion is colder, electrons flow and allow these fans to move. I'll get into that a little bit later, and the reasons why I have that. What's really interesting here is this propane tank is refillable. And I've seen plenty of non-refillable tanks in the past, and that's the whole reason why I got that smaller tank when I went camping, is that I wanted to have at least 4 times the amount of gas available for, $2 or $3 to fill up that small tank versus $5 for a canister of this size that's disposable. With this canister, you can legally fill it, you can legally transport it, and you can legally bring it inside of your home without violating laws. You have to check the local laws in your area, but nationally in Canada and in the United States, this canister can be transported. The other canisters that are non-refillable result in very serious fines and imprisonment if you transport them. They are also not safe. So you may hear people say that they've been using these types of canisters that are non-refillable and they refilled them. They're taking a huge risk. There's risk is likelihood and consequence. And the consequence of one of these types of canisters that's disposable leaking is a very catastrophic situation. The likelihood of a refillable tank is probably a low to medium risk likelihood. So overall, your risk isn't that high, but you have that chance. This removes the likelihood. You have a special relief valve that you can use to fill it, that you open so you can fill this thing properly without overpressurizing it. And the walls of this tank are much thicker and the valves are much stronger, and they have to meet rigorous inspection standards in order for this to be refillable. Okay, so just keep that in mind. You're not spending much more. This is a $20 tank. It's much worth this versus your life. So just, I don't care. People tell me, they've been using these tanks and refilling them for years, but how many of you have bank accounts that you've been using for years with a 4-digit password? That may have been acceptable in the past, or people have done it for a long time, but it does not mean that you're free from risk. So likelihood of risk is way down so that you don't have to experience those consequences. The other thing I noticed is there's a little magnet in here to hold that tank in place. How cool is that? Okay, so this is the refiller that's part of a kit for the larger propane tank. I assume I could probably use the smaller one. That propane tank out there is turned upside down. This is attached to it. This part right here attaches to your tank, and then there's a little Allen key that you stick inside of the tank here, and that allows it to vent. And then you fill the tank by pushing this lever downward, and liquid propane goes inside of the tank until the relief valve starts to spew out liquid propane. At that point, you stop filling and you turn off the relief valve with this Allen key. Of course, you will never want to do that refill process indoors. That is always an outdoor activity where there is plenty of air, no chance of asphyxiation, and no sources of ignition. Okay, keep that in mind, no source of ignition. It would be a good idea to have this nearby, but not likely that you would have to use that because of a propane explosion. So I went ahead and already attached this. I wanted to demonstrate the filters being attached in the hoses, but this requires connection outdoors. I always connect it outdoors just in case there's a little bit of spray of propane. I do not want that in the house. Propane is heavier than air, so I don't want it to be pooling anywhere. So anyways, that's the heater. This is how we start it. I'll demonstrate this in a little bit, but I want to show you this fan assembly. So we're going to move the heater so we have a little more light. I'm going to put this stove thermometer right here. It's magnetic. It gives me a good indication of the heat. And then I have this little metal piece of metal here that I was bent. And I'll hold on to that. I'll show you in a minute. So here's the fan. It's a set of motors in the back and the fans in the front. On the bottom is an aluminum can that I cut from a soda can, and inside of there is a screw that goes through the can, through a hole that was already there, and it's mounted on there. So what that does is it allows for me to place this fan assembly right here on the grate, this protection grate. Okay, so that allows the fan to stay in place without moving around. Of course, you will not move this heater when it's running, and you certainly won't want to move it while this is going, because this gets hot. So what happens, this area right here gets hot. There's a piezoelectric thermocouple in the middle here, and it's isolated from the hot part and the cooler side. So because this part's hotter, this part is colder, there's an electron flow, which is used to power these things. Okay, let me show you this little thing here. So what I've done is this little piece of metal just slips in right there. Okay, just gonna push it in place right where my can is located, and this metal bar right here, which is protecting your fingers from getting inside of there, is on top of this piece right here. So what happens is, it's on top of here, this is next, and then the aluminum can is below there. So this is not likely to move around. See, that's the whole idea. We don't want a big piece of hot metal floating around and falling down and hitting somebody. This is not an approved piece here. This, it's not an accessory that is mentioned in a manual. This is something I added, so use with caution. But I've seen a lot of people showing some videos of that. I just thought I'd show you in more detail what it looks like. And then let's fire this thing up. So the first thing to do is over here you have pilot, low, and high. Push down, get it onto the pilot setup, and then down here is a pilot light. So as soon as I push down, the gas is flowing. So I'll push down, light it, and what happens is there's a little valve in that pilot light that as soon as I let go, the propane is still flowing as long as that valve is hot. If that valve cools down, then there's an audible click and the propane stops flowing. So if I were to blow out the flame like that, no more propane flows. That's important. So if this thing goes out because somebody tips it or there's a wind that's blowing, that gas will no longer flow. You don't want propane flowing into the house. I just heard it click internally, so that means that there's absolutely no propane going through here. So I'll push down and light it again, let go, thermocouple's open, and then we just rotate that to the low position, and we have flame. Now on this low, there's about 5 hours worth of propane in that tank. With these tanks here, an enormous amount of time on low. That larger propane tank is about 100 hours, and the smaller one maybe 40. I'm not sure, I haven't calculated it. So anyways, I can already feel some heat. I'll turn up the heat just a little bit more. So you can push down, you can actually go, there's medium or just high. So I mean, you can kind of rotate back and forth between here. Just let it go to high. On that setting, you will go through the propane a little bit quicker. I find that the low setting is perfectly fine with the regulation of propane going through here into the heater. There's probably a little bit more pressure required. So instead of low, you probably need to go just a little bit higher than low if you want it to be about the same pressure. And there goes the fans. That's pretty awesome. Look at that. So they're starting to move, even though they look like they're stopping right now because of the camera, but they're going at a pretty fast pace, you can see. So they're hot too. I just kind of felt that on my finger. Anyways, the whole point here is that gas or heat, gas is burning, there's heat coming up and it's being pushed towards you rather than rising outward. This is probably more important if you're outside with this heater, or if you're in, like a tent or something, you just want to keep the heat on you. And I can really feel it right now. I'm going to turn this down because I'm a little bit close to it. So that's the heater. This right here is a cover, a nice little plastic cover for the propane tank when it's not in use. Of course, when this is not in use, the propane tank gets disconnected outside and stored. But when I need it, I use it. The other thing here is that if I ever leave this heater, I always shut off the heater. It doesn't matter if I have to get up and go get a glass of water upstairs or use the restroom or, go across the street. I'm going to make sure that this thing is always turned off. It's not hard to turn it back on. Just go back to the pilot light, light it up, turn it on, and you're back in business pretty quickly. In fact, I'll just leave it on low and you can see that it's already starting to heat up just fine. Okay. Those of you are wondering what those blue containers are, that's for a kerosene heater. Lighting that thing and putting it out and lighting it again puts off some odor. So I have to light this thing outside because of the odor, get it up to temperature, and when I put it out, I have to put out the heater outside rather than inside because it smells. It's got a lot of kerosene odor when it's lighting and turning off. So when that thing is burning, it's burning very efficiently and it's putting out a tremendous amount of heat. But I find this to be a lot more convenient. And I'm sad to say, but that propane is a lot less expensive than that kerosene. And propane has the shelf life of gravel. The kerosene is pretty good too. It will last a long time as well. But propane will last certainly a lot longer. And I mean storage. Okay, so if you have questions, please comment below. Appreciate you watching this. And if you have any questions on where you can get some of these items, I will post links. They are affiliate links, which means at no cost to you, you can help support me in these videos and the websites that I maintain to discuss and go through in great detail. So all these items I'll post on there. I certainly appreciate it if you're looking for one of these items and you click through. That would really help me. But you don't have to either. Just you can always search for this online. I will post a link that goes to my website that goes into a lot more detail and write-up of this heater, this wonderful heater, and all the little accessories that go with it. So, take a look for that. That's grayscale.zone if you're interested, and that's gray with an E. All right, so appreciate it. Thank you very much for sticking around for 20 minutes. I hope this was useful to you, and stay safe out there, folks. And remember to shut off your heater when you're not around it. Thank you very much.